Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our crypto fans. You have another episode of the Deep Q Cast with your moderators, Carlos, Matt, and Robert. It's great to see you boys on screen. I was really excited about this episode that we have in place. It's a little bit, it's a little different than what our normal ones is, and it's going to bring back a lot of nostalgia. I'm excited about it. The whole world of interns and securing job offers. It's been a long time since I had to go through that, but definitely brings back a lot of good memories and some stressful ones too. I'm looking forward to getting into that. But before we dive into that, very important questions, beers that we're drinking. Carlos, I noticed no Patriot water again today.
No,
What's going on? Yeah,
we had a little get together at the house for me and my son's shared birthday, and we bought a bunch of beers. So now I'm going with the leftovers. I'm working through them systematically, and
Nice.
I've got myself a little Blue Moon. I do in the summer. I do like the summer, like the wheat ale. So Blue Moon is a fantastic, albeit like somewhat general choice. I also love the Kona. Puts out an
Hey,
excellent
yeah.
song. Well, there we go. Puts out an excellent.
Nice
Kona,
segue.
Kona Big Wave is a fantastic one, and then my other all-time favorite, which I think we may or may not have covered, and if I just can't find them in Connecticut. They sold them in the city all the time. Was Einstock. Einstock White Ales are hands down my favorite beer, and fun story, it was the beer that Matt and I were drinking when we went out to the seaport in Manhattan in the middle of COVID. I bought a 6-pack of Einstock, and we sat on the seaport because we weren't allowed to go drink anywhere else, and conceptualized the idea of Deep Q Digital. So forever instantiated in my heart.
The official beer of Deep Q Digital.
Yeah.
I actually found so I'm in Florida right now for a couple of months, and the only one of the places that came up on my newsfeed was an ice bar. I don't know why Google is recommending ice bars to me, but their main drink is Einstock, so maybe I'll go.
There you
go. There you go. I've got Carlsberg. I was mentioning you guys before. This is the very first beer that I ever drank, although this is a little bit of a different one. So a little bit of nostalgia all around, talking about our interns and do's and don'ts, and drinking some beer.
Was this your first beer that you had when you were like 7 years old in Romania?
Yeah, 7, 6. It was like 15. But to be granted, I mean, I think the drinking age is 12 out there, so it's still legal.
Yeah.
It's so fun. You know what? This is a little bit embarrassing. Like when I was 15, I was actually at some other people's homes in Hungary. I was visiting, and one of the guys offered me a beer, a Carlsberg beer. And it was the first time I've ever had a beer. And I didn't realize that beer was carbonated. I was like, oh, this is so weird. I'm like, it's carbonated. And he's like lost in translation. He's like, yeah. He's like, oh, cool. It took me a while. I'm like, oh, wait, all beer is carbonated. Nice.
I love it.
Yeah. Boys, looking forward to chatting today. So we are going to help out our audience, those folks that are going to be starting their internship programs very soon. It's a super exciting time. I love my internship programs. I learned a lot from that, and obviously have made some incredible friendships through those kind of those grad programs. So we'll talk a little bit about how to go about securing that job offer if you're starting as an intern within financial services. Sometimes, though, interns may be joining smaller shops, and there are a lot of differences and nuances into how interns can think about securing those job offers versus internships at larger shops, which have more of a larger general rotational program. I know all of us have kind of worked at Deutsche Bank and some other larger shops in the past, so have some experience with larger shops. But I know Matt, I know Carlos and I, were all chatting about Matt. You kind of have a little bit of a more unique view on those things as well, right?
Only in the sense that I didn't do an internship, but have obviously taken and mentored many interns over the years. But yeah, so I think it really depends how you come into this.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, if you go via a program, a big shop. I mean, you mentioned two company structures, which I think are the key. You either go somewhere small where you'll have a different experience and you'll probably be a lot more one-on-one and hands-on, or you'll go to a big shop where you'll do more of a rotation plan and you'll see maybe many asset classes. You might do sales and trading. You might do a whole bunch of different things. And they're really different in terms of the experience you'll get and
Mm-hmm.
what people will expect of you as well, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Maybe what we could do to start things off to frame the information or advice in a way that's easy. We'll start with the background, like the inner workings, how the sausage is made regarding how internship offers are extended, and then how internship are transitioning from an intern to a full-time job offer, how those job offers are secured and approved internally. Carlos, I know you've managed interns before. Maybe you might be able to kind of kick things off on that part, like how the guts are all formed and structured.
Yeah. So,
It's
and I'll tell you what I so for context, I was at Deutsche Bank. In fact, I met Robert through the grad scheme at Deutsche Bank. Maybe there's a fun story for later about the night that we became friends.
Yeah.
Um, but point being, we having gone through those the grad the internship and the graduate scheme over at Deutsche Bank, as well as being the direct manager and being heavily involved in recruiting at Deutsche Bank and at Bank of America, which is my second stop in my banking career. I'm pretty well versed on sort of like the ins and outs of how to manage getting an offer from a grad or from an internship program to a full time offer at a large bank. So I think it's good to start there because there's some nuances there. And then, as Matt said, we'll end with sort of like just the generalities of working at a small shop as well. Um, but I think that the most important thing to note, and this is something that I never really fully understood until I became a manager of interns and was involved in the process for like discussing offers, is that probably 80% of whether or not you get a job offer from an internship program is more about the political setup of how the grad scheme is structured, more so than it is your performance as an intern.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the thing to think about here, and I'm not going to go too much into detail about how internship offers uh, get given because we actually had another episode that we'll put in the show notes where we talk specifically about how to get a job offer and how to get an internship offer and kind of get your foot in the door. So let's start off from the perspective of you have your offer, and sometime in late May, early June, you're going to be stepping on the desk. What do you need to be aware of? The first is that most large financial institutions only recruit from a small number of target schools. Um, so those would be like your cast of Ivy Leagues, and then non-Ivies like Stanford, Duke, Carnegie Mellon, University of Chicago, MIT, etc. Um, include Michigan and Virginia, depending on the program you're at, right? Um, and the reason why this gets done is primarily just because it's cheap, right? You don't want to recruit. You can't afford to recruit at every school in America, so you basically just like take schools. And what they typically do is they have a recruiting team. So they'll take some combination of like managing directors through analysts, and their job is to go to schools. They'll have on-site presentations. They'll do some filtering. They'll work with the schools themselves to get the top candidates, and then they'll offer your list. Once you get there, the continuation of that effect is that those alumni programs are probably the most important thing for you to be aware of in your process. And think about this from like a relationship management perspective. Let's say you're Deutsche Bank and you have a relationship with Harvard. And every year you go to Harvard and you take 10 interns. you need to maintain a relationship with the recruiting people there, with the professors, with the programs that feed into your program. And part of that relationship is maintaining some degree of continuity of every year we take, 10 interns, and that converts into 8 full-time offers. So if you're at Harvard and you come intern with us, trust me, there's a very viable chance that you're going to get an offer. Because otherwise you wouldn't waste your time doing the intern if you realize there was only, X percentage. So managing your yield is really important. And from the perspective of people understanding, like, right, what's my probability of getting an offer? The first things first is you need to understand sort of like the weight of your school's alumni network at that bank.
Mhm.
And a lot of that comes down to, how senior is the person running the, recruiting effort, how involved are they historically, how many people do they take into the internship program, and what's their yield of people that get offers. Generally speaking, and this is sort of like maybe a hot take, but uh, if you are an average kid from a target program that has a large allotment of students that come into the internship program, you have a higher probability of getting an offer than an exceptional kid from a non target school that got into the program. And the primary reason behind that is at the end of the day, when you go through your internship program and you're sitting at, the table, you're going to have a series of managers all sitting around, and they've ranked their kids. And think of it like sort of a bit of a horse trading thing, where you're going to have, HR, and they'll say, this year we have 50 spots. And there's going to be some MD that you've never fucking met before. And he's going to be sitting there with a packet of all of the kids that belong to his alumni network. So let's use Harvard and 10 as the round number. And he's going to say, okay, I do not give a fuck whether or not these kids are good. I need to get as many of these kids an offer to preserve my relationship with the university and with the people that funnel me kids.
Sounds wrong.
I mean, it does a little bit, but effectively, that's what it comes down to, because you have this relationship with professors, administrators, all that sort of stuff, and so you need to maintain that. Now, let's say you'll have like a non-target recruiting school, and it will probably be some guy also went to a non-target school, and he's going to have a hodgepodge of kids he also doesn't care about. And if it comes down to him having an argument as to why person X needs to get an offer versus person Y that is part of like the club, right? The average kid from Harvard is going to get that internship offer over the exceptional kid that went to like ASU all day long. Um, from my perspective, I've found that probably, like I said, 80% of this battle comes down to understanding who the people are in your alumni network that advocate for you at the end of the day when you have these sorts of things, and making sure that they know who you are and they know that you're halfway decent and that you have a pulse.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your feedback on that, Robert, Matt, etc.
Yeah.
That's my very cynical view of the world.
Yeah. I totally like, so I remember when I was going through my grad internship at Deutsche Bank in London. It was like 2011, and there was a European crisis that was happening right around then. That was kind of a fallout from the global financial crisis, and the number of jobs that were actually made available to the internships was slashed dramatically. So they were initially I think it was like an 85% accept or 85% offer rate. So it was very high, like you had touched on. There can also be situations though where things change in an environment, and then HR is not able to extend the same level of offers, and that's where things get super tenuous among a lot of these hiring managers. Um, I saw even within University of Chicago, we were 4 people that were working in the London office, and only half of us got offers. And I really think, like, when I look at the people who got the offers and the people who didn't, a lot of it, again, to your point earlier, was that a lot of it came down to the interpersonability of those candidates who received the offer and their ability to network and make sure that they were well known. Um, One piece of advice I would give to interns that are working in these type of jobs is find out who the senior recruiters are at the other schools and ask them to grab a coffee. you want to make sure that they're familiar with your name, just so that there is maybe like as little resistance as possible, um, and make sure that all the senior individuals know and agree that you're one of the people that's the in crowd and should be passed through.
Yeah, I mean, had a very similar type of experience. I was told by, so I would say I made friends with the junior alumni people, so like the associates and VPs that were fresh from Columbia Business School, and they're like, hey, we want to make sure we get as many Columbia grads in the door, so we're going to help you. And they were also very upfront, which is like, we'll help you in terms of telling you the lay of the land, but at the end of the day, at Deutsche Bank, there was the guy that at the time was running FIC trading, who was a very senior MD. And they're like, but this guy is the guy that you need to impress. So the very first thing that you do from the jump is send him an email and try and get time on his calendar. He will give you time. He will give you 15 minutes. Just go in there, make a positive impression so that when he's sitting in, that final meeting, he can be like, oh yeah, that guy made time on my calendar. He was proactive. I liked him. He was generally good. And that does a world of good. I never talked to that guy again after that 15-minute interview. I mean, because think about it, he's like running a multi-billion-dollar business. Like he took a 15-minute thing with an intern. So like that's plenty. But the fact that you had that thing, you took the proactive meeting, makes a world of difference. You just find out who those people are and get on their calendar as soon as you possibly can.
Yeah, I would say that you definitely can't negate networking and being proactive. Like that's honestly the best piece of advice is go and speak to as many people, especially if it's a rotation. You'll be doing that anyway, and you actually get a lot of feedback from other people, or you might meet someone. So we had there was a DB, what are they called now, a research team at DB. That actually had some interns that year, and they ended up not getting an allotment for interns. So they were just passing through, and then they'd come and recommend them. So even though they had no chance of getting taken on that desk, they'll give recommendations to other people, other desks as well, and that's just like networking as well. So then we'd speak to them, and then you'd get like a second look on someone that you probably would never have seen before.
Yeah, I would say that like networking is half the game. So maybe a follow-on question then is, um, we've covered sort of like your senior recruiting captain, and I hinted at understanding sort of like other junior-ish people that are in your alumni network. Who else do you need to have on your radar in terms of people that you need to network with in order to make sure you build a coalition?
So you started with the MD, and then the lead, kind of cohort lead for the intake for that year. So they're obviously people you need to know, and then you'll usually be given a well, you mentioned your peer group, right? As in the people that were 1 year above you. Is that what you said? You said get in with them and then the MD.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the next person is whoever you're assigned to, without question. Like that's the
Fuck that guy.
Yeah, like that guy. That guy's usually that guy's an asshole.
but like yeah, I mean that's got to be the next like most important. And I actually agree that that's probably the right order because you don't know necessarily who you've been assigned with is going to be the right fit for you anyway. So at least if you've got a good backing from the previous year, and then you've got you've spoken with some MDs, tried to do additional networking, great. Because you don't know what's going to happen, so those things will pay off. But then of course it's whoever you're assigned to. That's got to be the key.
Yeah.
And so your line manager or reporting manager may or may not have had more than 2 weeks to really give this any thought, if I'm honest. So they'll generally put out, depending on what you do, but for us, they will generally put out an application for projects to different teams. You then say, yeah, I've got something they can do for 6 weeks, and then say what it is, outline it, and then post it back. And then you'll either get accepted for interns or not based on what your projects are. So
Yeah.
that is a pretty standard way, but like I said, there's not that much lead up time to it. It would depend where you go. I don't know how it was at Bank of America, but it always seemed to be a struggle to have people with projects or people willing to do projects because it is an investment of time and everyone's busy. But I think we were pretty proactive because we saw that there's a pretty good conversion rate, especially in E. Like we had headcount, so we put the effort in.
Yeah, that's actually a great point though, because
Or
in my
headcount.
experience,
Find out who's
in
got
my
headcount. That's the key as well.
yeah,
Great
so
point.
in my experience of thinking about your direct line manager, there's usually two types of people that take on intern management as a voluntary activity. Because keep in mind, these are people that are working in a stress-filled environment where performance is key, and they're taking on an additional task that they're not going to really get paid for. So there's people that just genuinely care about developing young talent, and I'd say that's maybe 10% of all people that take on the job of like intern management, and then 90% of the remainder are people who are senior VPs or senior directors. Usually, senior VPs is about the right rank. Who have been told by their management that if they want to make director, they have to take on additional tasks and responsibilities, and the easiest thing to do is get involved in recruiting. So the one thing that I've seen tremendously is basically like there's a guy who's on the cusp of making director. Their boss basically tells them, get involved in recruiting, get involved in some sort of like extracurricular sort of like thing that shows that you're a team player and you're involved in like, the bank and all that sort of stuff. And so they do that. And like 2 days before they're supposed to submit an internship task, they're like, oh, fuck, what are they going to work on? I don't know. Let's just make something up. So find out what kind of like person your direct line manager is, right? And know that before you go stressing out about the work product that you put out, in the sense of like they're going to give you some project to do or something to do, know that like you're an intern. There's no world that exists that anything that you do in this industry is going to see light of day. No one's going to put any fucking capital at risk off of the stuff that you're doing, right?
I mean, they're not
They
even
literally,
you're not even registered,
yeah.
so most of the time you won't be doing anything. Like
You can't even pick up the fucking phone, right? Like there's literally nothing that you can do that's going to make any difference. So generally speaking, all of the stuff that you're doing is just like someone made it up and you're going to be working on it. So it's not the end of the world. Focus primarily on networking, focus primarily on like making sure that you build the right coalition and you're getting in front of the right people, and then do a passable job so you're not embarrassing when it comes to the tasks that you have. Because know also that your direct line manager, and this is a very cynical view, but like tell me I'm wrong, is probably just managing interns so that they are in line for promotion. And this is a thing that you have to do to show that you're a team player.
But it is funny because there is usually like a intern like presentation type of thing. I don't know how it was on FX, but at least actually that's not true. Even for EFX, I don't know how it was on the voice side of interns on FX, but across the rates business, all interns would do a presentation at the end, and even the quant guys as well. So even the E-desk we'd have Roll and everyone and have a big presentation of what they've been working on. You can make whoever your supervisor is look really stupid, or they will make themselves look stupid if they haven't done some effort to help you pass that as well, because it reflects poorly on them. So I think that's kind of why that sort of thing is useful to have as well, how much did they kind of learn? Were they able to navigate and get information out of people such that they can present? Because if you're the type of person that doesn't ask any questions, you will fail miserably at that presentation. You probably won't get a callback, and at the same time, your person who is your line manager will probably, even if true or not, will just say, they didn't seem interested. So the best thing to do is just be really as interested as you can be, and if there is a performance metric at the end, just say, try and get out whatever you can to be successful at that. And that could be directly from your line manager. They may have other like associates, analysts reporting to them that you can easily speak to, and will have maybe a bit more time or time after work to go through things. And that's kind of where you also build up your network. If you do get taken perm, then you're on the battlefield with those guys anyway. Most of the time, senior people tend to leave a bit earlier because they've got families and stuff.
That's great advice. This is I'm getting flashbacks, but like one of the things that I was it's like oh
Have
PTSD.
another sip of beer, Rob, quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's empty. And I remember when try like making sure you rehearse like sanity check your like that presentation with a lot of mid-level or like lower level people within the organization to review any, so you're not blindsided. You may think that you have the best presentation and then you stand up there and then you realize it's, there's a lot of holes in it. So being able actually to dry rehearse a lot of that with people that are actually in that room when you deliver the presentation will ensure that any questions that they have, you've already gotten those questions in a safer environment so that you have them already locked up for when you deliver that presentation.
Yeah. I did that a number of times with most of my interns because you are right, Matthew, which is, your day to day job. Don't really worry about that. They just made that shit up. The presentation, on the other hand, can make your boss look like an asshole if you do not do well. So I would always give the advice: practice, practice, practice. Pull me aside. I will jump off the desk to have you practice that. Also, practice with probably 3 or 4 other people, inclusive of other interns, your mom, whoever the fuck will listen to you for 10 minutes. And most importantly, if someone tells you you have 10 minutes to give your internship presentation, um,
Don't overrun. Yeah.
practice for 6. Right? Always roughly take like 2/3 of the plan for 2/3 of the time, because you will stutter, you will stammer, you'll get nervous, all that sort. And you don't want to overrun, because then that's when people start getting behind the gun. They get really nervous and they don't do it. And most importantly, you need to leave room for questions at the end. And generally speaking, you're going to give this presentation to like reasonably senior people. Um, I can tell you full stop that the name of the game, when you get asked questions that you don't know the answer to, right? Because they will ask you questions specifically to see how you react under pressure, is not under any circumstances to make shit up. You are always like, first and best thing is to just do your homework and be prepared for those types of questions. The second thing is just be honest. Like if you don't know, then the best answers I've ever seen, if you don't know questions, is not to make it up, but rather to say, you know what, I'm not 100% sure on that. Let me walk you through my thought process about how I would address that and what other information I might need to get, to a good answer, but I just don't know that. So at least they can see that you're engaged, you're a critical thinker. But I'd probably say the things that I've seen people get dinged for in their final presentations more than anything is not knowing. Like, I know you don't know, you know you don't know, and yet you're still making shit up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
that's great advice. Um, Cognizant of time, what about switching gears to smaller shops that have internship programs? I worked as an intern while I was actually in my grad school years at a hedge fund. It was a small long short equity hedge fund. It was kind of like a long running. It wasn't just a summer internship. So I have some thoughts on this too. But perhaps we can walk through just how that, because what we've talked to today is really just about more like larger shops. Sound good?
Yeah, no. In fact, why don't you lead off with that? Because all of my internship experiences have been at large shops, so would love to hear your insights, Rob.
Yeah, yeah. So when I was in my second year of business school, I worked for a couple of months for a smaller long short equity shop. Is maybe like 300 million to $500 million, something like that. It was the job offer wasn't necessarily to have a secured offer in place, but they were looking for someone that was younger, cheap, that they could give some experience to and get some work done. Matt, I know you touched on this. Your work product in those type of environments does matter. It is
Mm.
used, like that's the reason why it's a lean shop. So every head that they have on the desk is producing something that's supposed to be of value. So those jobs, I think it's a little bit higher stakes. You definitely learn a lot more during those environments. Um, and thinking about like how I navigated that. Um, when you're when you're going through those type of jobs, you don't always know what to do or where to go. You may not even really understand sometimes in full the project that you're assigned because you don't have the background and context. You haven't been at that company for a long period of time. The best advice I could give you is never share a work product until you feel like it is absolutely complete to the greatest extent that you can complete it. If there are still questions that you have about the work product, make sure that those questions are asked, and then you use that information to complete the project farther along. Um, like so that's like one thing that I would just suggest is making sure that you ask questions. That's fine. I always felt like people were open to asking questions, but sharing information that isn't fully complete or even completed halfway, because when they see the information, they're going to constantly start critiquing it. And if it's only 50% of the way through, you're going to create more questions than is necessary for that project.
I think that ties in with you get a really good feel for. So that's basically make sure you fully understand what needs to be done. Ask a lot of questions, right?
Yeah.
Be involved. Be on the, be focused. Even if you don't know the answer, just make sure you're asking questions so you can get to the right target point. And if you've got someone good leading you, then you should be able to get a good back and forth. But time is always an issue. Now, I think it goes back to we've had a couple of interns even at in Deep Q, and we've had. I mean, I've had projects where it's not something we'd put into prod at the bank, but they're actually real research projects we kind of like to look at and just not had the resources to do so. So you could be given something that is half interesting, even at a bank, right? It depends who's put the thought into it. But definitely at a smaller place, it's more likely you'll get something that actually has real meaning. And just whereas it may not go straight into prod, it will be like, okay, we're doing this as a full feasibility study with you. You are the developer or whatever it is, and we're going to test you to see whether you can deliver something. And if you can't, that's kind of the first test and probably the first hurdle you'll fall at, really, to be
Yeah.
honest. So then if you're not succeeding in that way, I would say, hey, I don't think I'm making as much progress. Likely you'll get the same feedback, and then it will be how can we progress to make sure that I do. And it could be maybe sometimes you're just not the right fit. That's the nice thing with like a bank rotation is you get to see a lot of different things. If you go directly to a shop and it turns out that's not what you want to do, it's tough. And that's always the thing I found with interns with anyone is you get a real feel for someone when they actually enjoy doing the thing that you're asking them to do. You can see it in their eye, and those are the people you really want to work with. When you see that little flicker of like, this is cool, I'm really like on about this. Those are the ones you want to keep. Like if you just sit there, to be honest, if you put me on a sales desk in my internship, I would have been like, it's not for me. I'm not a sales guy. So I would have probably hated it, and they would have known I wouldn't have had that flicker in my eye. Put me on the quant desk, I would have been there, questions all the time. They'd hate me for asking questions, but they would secretly love it because I'd push their knowledge as much as I could and try and get as much out of it as I could. And then try and do
That's a
some.
subtle way of Matt saying that he's smarter than everyone he worked for.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But the point is just to you want to push as much as you can. Like that's the it's
Yeah.
and it feels cheeky because I'm just an intern. How can I possibly do this? But that's the only way you're going to learn. And in a small shop, you have that ability. So when I actually get annoyed when people don't do that, like if you come to me and talk to me and like we have a good discussion, then you go away and I don't hear from you ever. That's actually just to me. I'm like, okay, well, he's clearly not interested. Then I'll move on.
Yeah. I think the big differentiator here is that when you go work for a large shop, and it's a great experience, I'd recommend everyone do it if they can. They look at you more as like a call option on someone who might be a potential fit for the firm at some point in time, right? And they know that they need to ingest bodies into their organization. And so for them, it's just a conversion funnel. It's like, all right, put them in, have them intern somewhere. Doesn't really matter exactly where. We'll sort out the ones that are generally smart and generally good fits for the firm and
The
generally work for the right.
culture, and they have an attrition problem to solve anyway. So they have like there's normally people leaving as probably as quickly as they can get them in. Depending on
exactly. Versus when you go work for a small shop, right? There, it's more like, all right, I need a specific thing, and as you said, Robert, every head on the desk is producing something, and there's an expectation to produce something, and you don't have the luxury of just having people lying about in case you might need them at some point in time, 2 or 3 years down the line. So the key is just to like really produce. And I love what Matt said basically, which is the number one thing that you look for when you are looking for someone with the intent of hiring them and working with them on a full-time basis is not like, are they the smartest people or whatever? It's really more, do they legitimately like doing this?
Mm.
Right? Because I think a lot of people in finance love the idea of working in finance because, like, there's some prestige. You get to tell your friends you work at a hedge fund or a bank or something like that. But do you actually love the thing that you're doing on a day-to-day basis? You're gonna be working fucking like 80 to 100-hour weeks banging this thing out. You better fucking
Mhm.
love it, and you better really want to dive into it and want to make this your craft.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's
Just
like,
leave,
you're
just
gonna be
go,
out the
do something
door.
else.
Yeah, you're gonna be out the
Well,
door.
I would say you should do that for your own self-worth anyway. Like if you don't enjoy it, go do something else. But then at the same time, someone else could do it. Like you potentially just knock someone else out of the job that they actually do love, and they might not be quite as smart as you right now. But man, if you really develop time and passion to something, you will become the master of the craft. Might take a little bit longer than someone else, but you will become that master of the craft.
Yeah. And I almost
Yeah.
always look for interns that have meet like minimum viable hurdle of, are you intelligent enough to do this? Which is shockingly low because I have a job. Um, and then from there, it's really more along the lines of like, all right, how much energy and like attention are you going to give this? And you can tell almost immediately when you meet somebody and when they're working for you, how much they love it, how much they're chasing after it. And it's really about the engagement they take. Like, are they taking your time with meaningful engagement? Are they, working nights and weekends? And I'm not saying you need to work every night and every weekend, but just like when you're doing something you like, you're going to find yourself descending down that time hole, and you'll be like,
Mhm.
oh shit, like, oh, there you go. And so it's not an unnatural thing. I don't think it's a shitty thing to be like, man, I'm going to devote nights and weekends to this every once in a while. You can still have balance, but like if you love something, you're really going to go down it. And it's, as an employer, you're not looking at it from the perspective of, I need somebody who will work all these hours for me. No, I don't want that. In fact, I actively want people to take time to recharge their batteries and do shit. But from time to time, if you really like what you're doing, or if you really need to get shit done, like, you just know the people who are engaged, because they're just like, they'll go down a hole and they will just pursue something to the very end. And it's a really beautiful thing to watch that, because that's like an aid in their own development.
Yeah, and I think that's the big difference with the kind of big shop versus more bespoke, direct, smaller shop. Um, is you kind of have to know that's what you want to do if you go into the smaller shop. I would say not, you don't necessarily need, right, this is what I definitely want to do. You can go to experience it, but you'll get, if that's really what you want to do, you'll get a hell of a lot more out of it than going to a bank where you'll be rotated around and doing a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
But
I actually
it's
think
hard
that
to know,
there's,
right? It's actually how do you know that as
Yeah.
a 20 what 23 year old? It's like
I mean, now you make decisions so much earlier. I mean, I get calls with people looking for career advice, and they have their juniors, and they already have their senior internships locked up. It's kind of wild to
yeah.
see how far in advance things happen these days.
I think one of the important things, and Robert, you kind of alluded to this, um, which is a lot of small companies will take you on off-cycle internships if you
mm,
network and find them. So I always make the recommendation, if you're not quite sure if you want to do a large shop or a big shop, like, try and get at least one summer internship. And those summer internships are very well time boxed. They'll give you 10 weeks from, July till, August. You still have plenty of time where you could do something before or after, even for a few weeks, or you can do something like, part time in the middle of a semester. Some schools even have, things where you can do it mid semester. But if you want to mix and match, I think it's a good thing to get experience at a small shop and a large shop, just so you can kind of see what the trade off looks like. Then you can make an informed decision on your own.
Yeah, and I would say, for me, the points that you touched on is finding something that you're passionate about. That strikes a big chord for me. I mean, I worked on a trading desk, and I was so focused on getting the job and working at the shop that I didn't really spend time thinking about whether this is something that would be a long term interest to me. I was kind of blindsided by that, and ultimately, I yeah, it led to me being a lot less happy. And so I would say save yourself time by really having some points of reflection to really understand whether it's good for you. I know it can be scary sometimes. You might be on a job that you got an offer, it's secure, it's a bird in the hand rather than two in the bush, and you might say, okay, you might be risk averse and be willing just to take it, but think about the time that you're wasting, because it's an opportunity cost. Every moment you spend doing something you don't love means that you're not spending time doing something that you do love.
No, for sure. I 100% agree with that. I think when you get recruited, people will often typecast you and try and like you'll get recruited for a specific thing, and that might work out 9 times out of 10, right? They might be like, oh, you were an athlete, you'll be a great salesperson, right? Or you uh you have like a STEM background, you'd be a fantastic quant or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you're like, well, actually, I'm very quantitative, but I want to engage with clients. Or it might be
Yeah.
that like I'm really good in a team environment and I played sports, but I really just want to be a trader or I want to be a quant. So like, don't let
Mm-hmm.
yourself be pigeonholed and go after the thing that you want. It's better to go after the thing you're passionate about and set a boundary, but like I don't really want to do that, than it is to um, pigeonhole yourself or put yourself in a situation where you're just not going to succeed, because those guys get weeded out very quickly.
Hmm.
I love the chat today, guys.
Yeah.
This is really fun. This is a special one. I liked it.
Yeah. Can I share one
Oh,
story?
please, please.
Just because I think it's fun. It's a good
I'm
time.
getting
Uh,
nervous now. Like, what's
Let's go.
going on to the
I got my
story?
beer in my hand.
so this is the origin story of the friendship of Carlos and Robert.
Okay.
Oh, I love it.
We weren't interns actually, so full caveat. You did your internship at the Deutsche Bank London office. I did my internship in
Yeah.
the New York office, but you switched over to New York for a grad program, and the grad program at Deutsche Bank was very similar to the internship program. With one exception, is that like you started off as a rotator in the grad program, then they gave you a desk at the end of the rotation. So it felt very much like the internship. You were hustling for a job, and it was very stressful. The HR ladies referred to it as the Deutsche Bank Hunger Games, and there was so much gamesmanship and so much stress because people were like, "Oh, you want this desk?" It's like I remember uh, I had another friend where we like coordinated like our third rotation. Like I already had a job lined up, so I took the rotation that she took on her second rotation to make sure nobody else got it. And there's just like all sorts of like craziness. But I remember sometime around like 11 o'clock at night, we were both on the third floor at Deutsche Bank, which is a fixed income desk. You were on the structured credit like trading
Yeah.
desk, and I
Uh-huh.
believe I was on like muni bond structuring at the time. That was my rotation, and I see Rob over there, and I wasn't friends with Rob because he had gone through the London trading program, and we were like sort of we'd like talk to each other in like orientation or whatever, and then like he rolls over, stressed as shit, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to grab a beer?" And I'm like, "It's 11. I want to go home." And I got this report that I'm supposed to get into the hands of the MD by like 6 a.m. tomorrow, but fuck it, let's go get a beer. So we go to the Dwayne Reed on 40 Wall Street. We're too poor to even fucking go to an actual bar and
Yeah.
get a drink.
Yeah.
You could
We go
hit
to
Stone Street too far.
no, not even that. We go to the Dwayne Reed. We go to the Dwayne Reed on 40 Wall Street. We buy two tall boys of like Coors Light, and we sit there and we're literally chugging these. We're brown bagging these like tall boys of Coors Light, and just going on about how stressful and terrible our lives are as interns. Um, Drink for like 10, 15 minutes, but from there I was like,
It
all
was
right,
beautiful.
that's my fucking dude. So the
It's,
moral behind the story is that like 12 years later, Rob and I are still fantastic friends. Our families know each other. We do business together. It's a good friendship. So when you're going through this process, also take time to sort of like uh, look at the forest from the trees and make sure that you make friends with the people that you are working with, because if you view them as friends and not competition, you'll have a fantastic lifelong bond. That's my
Yeah,
that's my
that's a
my
good
plug.
note.
And the requirements for that friendship is 11 p.m. beers out of a paper bag on the street wearing a
I
suit.
mean,
So,
not always, but if you're degenerates like me and you, then it's always the recipe for fast friendship.
yeah,
maybe you do yoga or meditation or something healthier, but in our
yeah,
case, it was tall boys on the street.
love it. Love that story. Man, it takes me back, guys. It was great catching up with all of you. Thanks so much for joining.
Cheers,
All
everyone.
right, cheers,
Bye.
boys.
See ya.